Wherever you're listening in the world, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this special Israel at 75 edition of IsraelCast. Indeed, the podcast powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. I'm Stephen Shalowitz. First, remind you that for over 120 years, long before the State of Israel was established, Jewish National Fund USA has been the premier philanthropic movement for the land and people of Israel. While best known for planting trees in Israel, JNF USA contributes to Israeli life in so many ways, including community development in the Negev and the Galilee, preservation of heritage sites, supporting people with disabilities, and connecting high school and college students to Israel. To learn more and to see how you can contribute, do visit jnf.org. Once again, after all these years, hope you got it, jnf.org. Now, to mark Israel's milestone 75th birthday, our gift to you is Shahar Azani, our featured guest on this episode of the show. A passionate advocate for Israel who knows everything, and I mean everything, that there is to know about the country. Shahar is Senior Vice President at JBS, Jewish Broadcast Service. He's the former Executive Director for StandWithUs here in New York and a former Israeli diplomat at Israel's Foreign Ministry for over 16 years, having served in London, Los Angeles, Nairobi, and right here in New York City. He began his career in law at Chaim Zadok and Company, based in Tel Aviv, focusing on litigation. He has a law degree as well as an MBA from Bar-Ilan University. And if his name does indeed sound familiar, that's because this is Shahar's second appearance on IsraelCast. I'm so looking forward to talking Israel at 75 with Shahar in our conversation, which begins right now, as Shahar joins us on the line via Zoom from his home right here in New York City. Welcome to the program, Shahar, and happy birthday to Israel.
Thank you so much. And Stephen, it is always a pleasure to be a guest on your show and to support this great cause with JNF.
All right. Well, listen, we love having you. This is your second visit, and I know it's not going to be your last. So anyway, again, always looking forward to chatting with you. Listen, we do want to talk Israel at 75, of course. Once again, happy birthday to Israel. And I want to start out by asking you to complete the sentence, Shahar. Israel at 75 is?
As vibrant and exciting as ever.
I like your energy and enthusiasm. So let's tease that out. Vibrant because?
Because even look at Israeli politics, look at the Israeli society. It is always so bubbly. The passion is visible to the core. People go out, express their minds, show their caring. I mean, the one biggest danger, in my opinion, that any nation could face is indifference. When people don't care anymore, when they don't feel anymore. And if there is one thing that's palpable, that is you can literally touch when you visit Israel, as I just recently did with JNF, it is that element in Israelis and Israeli society of that incredible fire that emanates from within on a variety of issues. And to me, that is very exciting.
And what do you think is the origin of that vibrancy and the origin of that fire?
Well, Israelis care. You know, we have an opinion, we care. There is always that joke about every taxi driver is a prime minister, and we all have 10 different opinions on each and every topic. And you have to admit that there is a reason why the world is so interested when it comes to Israel, because Israel is an interesting place on a variety of levels. When you look into the geopolitics, the security issues, archaeology and history, religion, technology, healthcare, empowerment of women, the Jewish people's history. I mean, there are so many fascinating elements to Israel. And then you take all of these people from all over the world, whether it's Jews who come from all over, whether it's the non-Jewish citizens of Israel, and they coexist in this incredible bubble. Like for me, when I interacted with a good friend of mine in the foreign ministry, who happens to be a Bedouin, whose grandmother spoke perfect, get this, Stephen, Yiddish. She spoke perfect Yiddish only in Israel. Only in Israel.
Is that Ishmael Khaldi?
Yes, Ismail Khaldi, exactly. Amazing, right?
Yes, absolutely. We've had him here on IsraelCast, and I can call him a friend as well. I know he's had a remarkable experience himself and a remarkable life, and I think that's testament to Israel as really being a melting pot, is what you're talking about.
When I stand next to somebody like Ismail or other, Druze or Arab Christians or Muslim members of the Israeli diplomatic corps, and can I stand next to an American Jew who made Aliyah to Israel and has become a diplomat, and you look at me just by visual, I am very close to him, right? Like the fact of our belonging to the region, I always make that joke, like put a kafia on me and sunglasses and I can sell you oil. So that's Israel for me. That versatility is incredible.
If all else fails, Shahar, you have a whole new second career ahead of you.
Exactly.
So Israel is really, as we say, it's a melting pot, but there's a method to the madness, wouldn't you say?
But for sure. I mean, think about this. When you think about Israel's achievements, and when I think about Israel at 75, especially by the way, in this context of JNF, of which I'm a great admirer, think about this. Israel is the only country on earth whose numbers of trees keeps on growing every year. That excites me. I love that element about Israel. Only a few months ago, I got a phone call from a good friend of mine who happens to be the mayor of the city of Ramat Gan. Ramat Gan is the city I grew up in. It's right outside of Tel Aviv, our little version of suburbia. And Carmel Shama Cohen, the mayor, used to be Israel's ambassador to the OECD, where we got to meet each other and work together. And he called me to let me know that his city has become an environmental lab to fight climate change, where Israeli startups who focus their technology on combating climate change on different levels, from water issues, preventing flooding, etc., come to his city to be able to experiment those solutions and then to share it with the world. He has infused education into the Israeli public school system in his city about the need to fight climate change and understanding global environmental challenges. He has instituted collaborative efforts between the municipality, Bar Ilan University, and NGOs, environmental green organizations, to work together. Like we've seen this kind of structure, but always butting heads, where the NGOs fight the authorities and together they battle in courts. Not in this case. And to me, it's a great symbol of what Israel is. What is the message we're trying to send? Not just in the fields of technology or innovation, but in our mere human dealings of how we're doing things. And if we can show the way by deeds of how we can work together and integrate our efforts, we can truly be a light unto the nations. And living a life that's dedicated to something like this, Stephen, it couldn't get more exciting.
Shahar, you've invoked technology and innovation several times already in our conversation, and I don't have a question in particular for you, but I suppose the question would really be for you, what excites you about Israel at 75 from a technological perspective?
Well, I think the spirit of innovation is throughout, Israeli society. Now, of course, when it comes to the technology and the high-tech industry being responsible for over 54% of overall Israeli export, to see the kind of technologies Israel is able to export the world. I mean, I love the ability, and that's a personal favorite of mine, to make a positive difference in people's lives. I mean, technology in general is great, but what really excites me, Shahar Azani, is to see the ability to make a difference in someone's, personal, individual situation that comes from Israel. And an example for this I can give you was one person of great inspiration that I got to meet in the last few months, a woman entrepreneur by the name of Daniela Gilboa. Daniela, and she's an example of what I'm talking about. She is an embryologist who worked, in an IVF lab. Israel for decades has been a global leader on IVF, but the technology has remained the same for the past 4 decades. And in 2018, Daniela kind of had a eureka moment where she got up and said, hey, we've been doing, the same old for the past 4 decades. There must be a better way to do it. And she brought together some of the best minds in Israel. And she created an AI segment of the IVF treatment, building a company called AIVF. And using that kind of software in IVF technology, you're able to reach a positive solution of the process. Let's say a baby, instead of 7 to 9 cycles, this can go down to 2 to 3. Now, imagine that in Israel, IVF is covered by the government up to a certain age. But here, for instance, in the United States of America, each cycle costs tens of thousands of dollars. Now, imagine when you come to a family and you say, not 9 cycles, but 3, 2, 1. Imagine the impact, imagine the accessibility of those services to people who couldn't afford it before. Imagine democratization of the process and empowerment of patients. Imagine empowerment of couples so that the information coming from the lab is transparent. I think it's a specific example, but it's a perfect manifestation of what I'm talking about, making an impact, a positive difference in people's lives. And that difference, whether it comes from Israeli, when I was in the foreign ministry and we did work with Mashav, Israel's international aid agency, and we were able to send experts all over the world who share their knowledge with people, that goodness that comes out of the heart of a nation is what excites me about Israel at 75, at 76, at 77, and for as long as I can be part of this incredible endeavor.
And so Israel is doing all of these amazing things. To what extent is that goodwill then translated on the international scene, Shahar?
That's a beautiful question. First of all, Stephen, you always ask beautiful questions.
Thank you.
When I served at the United Nations, that question came to my desk all the time. You saw there was a recent incident a few months ago when the Israeli representative was banished from a conference of the African Union. Yet on the bilateral level, we have a great relationship with many African governments. The South African government is downgrading the level of representation of the Israeli diplomacy in South Africa. And Cape Town is striving for water. So what I'm saying is, yes, on the one hand, there are people who would come to me and say, this approach is naive, Shahar. You have to have a quid pro quo system. If somebody is good to you, they're good to you. If somebody is not as good to you, they have to show their support. But the truth of the matter is that the way Israeli diplomacy, and indeed Israel, carries itself is not in a quid pro quo fashion. We don't sit with a small notebook and say, hey, you voted for me, I'm going to do this for you. Yes, it plays some part. But the truth of the matter is that wherever help is needed, we will be there. Israeli NGOs have gone out of their way to places with whom we have no relations. Organizations like Israel Flying Aid that went to Syria and beyond, to places we can't even talk about, just to extend a helping hand, being Israelis, because this is who we are. We don't operate by the book of shopkeeping. We operate by the grand vision of what Zionism is, and that is to be a light unto the nations, to be a significant, positive member of the family of nations. That's what guided me as a diplomat, and I believe wholeheartedly that through doing this work, through being there wherever we're needed, we will pave the way long-term for goodwill that will eventually have an effect on the diplomatic international machinery and will make a positive impact for Israel.
So it seems to me from what you're saying is that currently whatever Israel does is not garnering that goodwill. But what you're saying is this is a long-term approach. How many years are we talking, or how many decades?
It does garner. Like there is a lot of goodwill. Many doors have been have opened up for Israel and for Israeli companies as a result of the way Israel conducts itself. We see that goodwill translated almost immediately on the people-to-people level, on the business people level. Just next week, I can tell you that I will take part in a major conference in Israel that focuses on business aviation. Business aviation. And the idea is to bring players from the aviation sphere who come to Israel from all over the world, including various countries in the Middle East, including some countries that we don't have a relationship with, to come together under this auspices. But the truth is that this is exactly what diplomacy is all about. Business diplomacy, making those people-to-people connections. So yes, on the political sphere, it takes a little bit more time, a little bit more effort, but we're not talking about something that we're going to see in a century. This is something that the results of which are quite visible and palpable almost immediately on various levels of human society.
And I suppose that really dovetails then into the conversation about the Abraham Accords, because for a long time, Israel did have economic ties with the UAE.
Right.
And so we've seen the fruits of that come to bloom.
Only Oman recently, which opened its airspace to, Israeli airplanes. Now, a flight from Tel Aviv to Bangkok has been reduced from 11 hours and a half to 8 hours. Significant difference. So there is a large amount of goodwill and shared interests. There is a lot that we can do in the region. You know what has been my number one frustration as a diplomat? I was sitting there at the United Nations in Nairobi, working on environmental issues, collaborating, bringing Israeli knowledge to various places, just in that realm, through working in that organization. But the one place I couldn't send Israeli experts to, I couldn't send them to Zambia, I couldn't send them a 45-minute ride to Ramallah to deal with agricultural issues. And that's incredibly frustrating. And once we're able to open those doors and start having people-to-people interaction, then we will see a difference. I'll give you, a specific example. When we had a resolution then at the UN coming to condemn Israel on certain environmental issues, like, every once in a while we'll see that in international organization where the agenda will be abused to condemn Israel because, hey, why not? The Iranians will come and condemn Israel for attacking trees in South Lebanon. And yet, when the resolution came forth, instead of Israel saying, we're going to reject it, we said, you know what, table that resolution and let's create another one, which instead of denouncing Israel, we will have a resolution to create a partnership between heads of Israeli municipalities and Palestinian municipalities who will collaborate on dealing with sewage water or with dealing with other issues that, affect each other, because again, our lives are intertwined. And not only will we support such a resolution instead of making it into a paper airplane and chuck it out the window, we will also fund it. And the beautiful thing and not so beautiful about it, that it was accepted by everyone except the Palestinians.
So what happens next?
That's the problem. And that's why we have to keep on trying. You know me, Stephen. I am by nature incredibly optimistic. I mean, how can I not be?
I couldn't tell.
Taking Israel for granted, even at 75, is to me the most naive thing you can do. I mean, look at this incredible miracle. I remember, and I told you about this in our last conversation, about the late Captain Elgin Long. He passed away last year. But one of the most memorable things I take with me forever and I cherish about knowing Elgin was when we arrived in Israel on this homecoming for him after so many decades. And he's wandering through Ben Gurion International Airport.
By the way, I'm going to stop you right there, Shahar. Can you just remind our listeners that might not have heard that episode who he is?
First of all, I recommend not only for you to listen to that episode, but listen to each and every episode of IsraelCast, because if you want to be educated, empowered, and enjoy a great conversation, this is where you're going to get it. So just a quick reminder about the Alaska Airlines story. I'm of Yemenite descent. My grandparents came to Israel from Yemen. And about, 7 years ago, I found out something that I didn't know. I didn't know that the airplanes that carried a majority of Yemenite Jewry rescued them and brought them to Israel back when Israel was reestablished were Alaska Airlines planes. And that gave me such an incredible sense of excitement to be able to meet Elgin Long, who at the time was the last surviving member of those Alaska Airlines crew members who made those trips. I got a chance to say thank you to him. And immediately we latched onto that opportunity. At the time I was with StandWithUs. We created the trip to Israel. We brought him, we honored him. We just wanted to say thank you on behalf of so many people. And you should have seen their faces in Israel. I'll never forget it. And as we were landing in Tel Aviv and going through Ben Gurion International Airport, at the arrival hall, you'll see those black and white pictures of Israel's history. And for all of us, it's history. But he will take a look at those pictures and say, oh, wow, yes, I remember this. That's exactly what it looked like. It's incredible what you've done this, and you've done all of this in 70 years, and it still gives me goosebumps. Because to think about that moment where we take for granted our walk through the terminal, but it really is an incredible, unique miracle on the global stage, Stephen. It really is. And if you're able to remember that fact every day, it really will have an effect on the way you look at things and the great privilege we have in our generation today to be able to live side by side with Israel. It doesn't, it has its challenges, so many of them on so many levels. But if there is one thing that you can't take away from Israelis and Jews in general, will be the ability to critique, to criticize, to have an opinion, to have a lively debate, which we do every day.
Shahar, you just mentioned your grandparents. They immigrated to Israel from Yemen with nothing to a place that had nothing. Israel then was not the Israel it is today. And so I'm just wondering, what do you think that they would make of the country today if you were to take them on a tour of Israel? And what does it mean for you personally to share the Israel story, given your own family background?
Well, my family background is very significant in shaping my personality and who I am. First of all, because when you think about Yemen, but not just Yemen, so many other places as well in the Middle East where Jews came from, Israel was a dream that was recited in the prayer books. And I'll never forget one of the stories about the On the Wings of Eagles, which was the name of the operation on which, the Yemenite Jews came to Israel. The second half, the first half came in the 1880s. They had to be convinced to get on the planes, and they had no idea what a plane was. So they had to go and actually read the verse from the Bible that talks about, I'll carry you on the wings of eagles and brought you unto myself, to tell them that these are the wings of eagles that will carry them to Jerusalem. And only then did they agree to get on the plane. So you understand that there is a gap. One of the funnier stories that Elgin used to tell, and it's very well known as kind of like Israeli mythology, is, you had to cram a lot of people into the airplane, and Elgin had to make all of the calculations of weight per gas, per whatever needs to be done. And, Yemenite Jews were very, very skinny. So you were able to bring many more people on the plane than you should have maybe. And he told me that he got to the back at some point to see how they're doing, and he saw them trying to make coffee or tea right above the gas tank on the airplane, and he kept saying, not the best of ideas. So, you have all of those elements of introduction, and you come to a tough place. Many of the experiences of these new immigrants to Israel have been tough. Issues of racism, which are, inherent to human nature. People who come from different places, they didn't come from, cultured Europe or the US, just similar to Ethiopian Jews who arrived, back in operations Moshe and Shlomo in the 80s and 90s. So this element of integration has been tough. And it's fine because it's part of an immigrant's experience. And I remember growing up on the outskirts of Ramat Gan, where it wasn't even a city. All of the area I grew up in was like surrounded with sands. And we were living in this, 4-story building, housing for new immigrants. And I remember looking out the balcony and seeing my grandfather coming back from shul, walking, holding his hat, walking in the winds on the sand, just trying to make it back to the apartment. And I'll never forget the biggest message I got from my grandparents when they were observing this. They looked at me and said, you're lucky. You're lucky because you got to be born here when Ahya Asher Ahya, they said, which is, the Almighty God brought us back home. I hope you will forever appreciate, the opportunity given to you. So beyond all of the challenges, beyond every challenge that exists, every problem from, making ends meet to coping with social issues and economic issues and political issues and security issues, there is this underlying sense of appreciation. To pause for a minute and say thank you for being born in this generation. It also goes hand in hand with, my experience representing Israel. Many people will ask me, Shahar, you deal with the bad guys all the time. How do you have patience or stamina to listen to all of those horrible things about Israel? But to me, it's a great privilege. It's a great zchut to be able to stand on the front lines and fight for Israel, because I get to do it. For thousands of years, we yearned for a state of our own, but we didn't have it. And now we do. And I get the chance to speak up for it. When I speak for the ordinary Israeli who may not even know English or the ways of the world, who just wants to express how we feel. And I feel like I could be that mouthpiece because that sense of appreciation has been instilled within me by my family and my grandparents, and a lot of hard work to make it to where we are in Israel. Imagine a couple of generations, and from people who didn't know airplanes, I'm sitting in front of you with earphones talking in English about Israel. What a great miracle and achievement.
I oftentimes think that the Israel today would absolutely blow the minds
Yeah,
of those that came
for sure.
from countries that weren't very developed, let's say.
Right.
Um, Yet, I think that those that came from countries that were developed would also be absolutely
Yeah.
amazed, especially in the cultural sphere. And as you know, I just recently, while I was in Iraq in
Right.
November, and
Right.
Iraq, of course, the Iraqi
Like
Jews.
following you is an adventure unto itself, I have to say.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, that was just a phenomenal experience. But the reason why I bring this up is because before the trip, I had done quite a bit of research into the Iraqi Jewish community. I was already familiar with the Iraqi Jewish experience, having lived in Singapore, which is a Baghdadi community, and they pride themselves on being Baghdadi. But I wanted to do more of a deep dive before my trip. And so I did that. And when I really realized the extent that the Baghdadi community, the Iraqi community, was entrenched in Iraqi society at the highest of levels, the
Right.
sophistication of that community. And they left that behind to go to a place where, again, had nothing, and they left Iraq with nothing except just their grit, their determination, and their brain power to make it work.
You know,
And
Nissim Mishal, based exactly on what you said, Nissim Mishal is one of the veteran Israeli media personalities. He's been present for decades and decades in the Israeli media sphere. Now he has a radio show on Israel's radio. He's had a beautiful career, and he wrote a book, his memoir book, and the book actually tells exactly that story, Stephen, about his family coming from Iraq to Israel, and the challenges, the racism. Suddenly, you know, a family that's cultured, that used to work in the highest echelons in Baghdad, had now to go to the, you know, the office, the clerk of the Jewish agency, and to be a street sweeper or any other, you know, menial labor jobs that they were given by the government at the time, and those challenges and frustrations. And with all of this in his background, here is Nissim, you know, today.
And the reason I bring this up is because it shows, again, the grit, the determination of those Olim, those that
Right.
immigrated to Israel, that made Aliyah to Israel, and also the cultured nature of these individuals and how they really helped Israel's cultural scene blossom. And I want to go there now also to talk about Israel is really a cultural mecca.
Yeah, more museums per capita, more academic degrees per capita, more doctors, that's the
Mm.
truth, per capita, more sushi places in Tel Aviv per capita than a lot of other people. Like, there is this great thirst in Israel for everything. Like, one of the experiences you get when you come from Israel to the United States is to understand that so many people, and you are one of the most seasoned travelers ever on the global stage, but so many people across the US have never even had a passport, nor did they think about leaving the United States. Whereas as an Israeli, one of the things you really want to do is get out there. When can I go? When can I see the world? Where can I venture and explore new places and new people? You have that drive within you that you bring back home, because you take the world with you and you bring it back into Israel. And that is exactly what makes the Israeli earth, the Israeli ground, so fertile with ideas and visions. Even, you know, when you talk about the film, you know, cinema, Israeli literature. I remember one of my most fun experiences when I was consul for culture and public diplomacy in Los Angeles. And there was a movie. There was a movie called Waltz with Bashir that was an animated feature, and it came to LA, and it was, of course, nominated in the animated category in the Oscars. And I of course, was focused on the issues, right? As an Israeli diplomat, let's talk about Waltz with Bashir, the first Lebanon war that Israel had, and the political implications. And I was focused on discussing that and bringing experts. And it was incredible to see that what so many others were interested in is, that's a great animated feature. How did you produce that for such a meager budget? We have to spend millions and millions making these movies, and yet you're able to produce this like that. That was what interests them. And that taught me so much, Stephen, about addressing people's needs, about being able to interact with people based on their fields of interest, not just living in my own bubble. And I think that's one of the challenges we have today, that so many of us, a lot of Israelis, Israeli politicians sometimes and others would think that everybody knows us, of course, everybody knows everything about us, everybody's interested in what we care about. And I think if we pause for a minute to understand that, yes, we're interesting, but we should also look into what might be interesting for other people and find those points of interface and connection, that would take us 10 steps forward, not just one.
And as we talk about Israel at 75 and the arc of Israel's development, I think we would be totally remiss if we didn't talk about Israel's culinary scene, because certainly at its founding, Israel had more pressing things to think about than what they would whip up over there and what they would whip up in the kitchen. I mean, they had their own security to think about, and that was first and foremost. Yet, fast forward 75 years, Israel has become an absolute culinary mecca. And we do want to give a shout out to the Galilee Culinary Institute, which is a new culinary center being built in the northeast of Israel at Kibbutz Gonen, which is a beautiful part of the world, not even just Israel, but a beautiful part of this planet. And it's set to open in May 2024. And I do have to give a very personal shout out to the What's Burning podcast from the Galilee Culinary Institute. It's hosted by Mitchell Davis, the one and only, and yours truly is producing that show. And so we do want to give a shout out so that people can also tune into that program. And of course, JNF is behind the Galilee Culinary Institute. It's the brainchild of Master Spice Blender Lior Lev Serkars. And so I want you to talk about Israel at 75 from a culinary perspective and this whole melting pot. We used that term earlier, but let's talk about it in terms of Israel's culinary scene.
I think it's quite literal, Stephen, isn't it? When you think about the beauty that different communities bring to the table, literally, the kind of culinary heritage that each brings together, you talk about the ultimate fusion. It's Jewish, it's Arab, it's Ashkenazi, it's Sephardic. You see a lot of groundbreaking cuisine coming out of Israel. Many of the Israeli chefs are now all over the world who are able to present, Israeli cuisine and food. What a great connector that is. I mean, think about culinary diplomacy, the ability to bring famous chefs like Asaf Granit, who works in London and Paris and Israel and elsewhere, and to share through food the story of Israel and the story of people in general. Because when you think about that connecting element, one of the things that come to my mind is Idan Reichel, for instance, one of Israel's prominent musicians. And one of the things he speaks about when he tries to spread the words about Israel, he doesn't do advocacy or hasbara, he just tells his story. And he tells a story about, the music that connects people. And he tells a story about playing those Ethiopian elements in his music that gets to play on a Jerusalem bus that happens to be packed on the noon of a day of travel. And an Ethiopian school child who sits in the back of the bus happens to listen to the voices of his community, his mother, his uncle and aunts, and understands that, hey, I'm connected to this place. Now, what I love about this, as well as the culinary message that comes out of Israel, is it's fun. It's enjoyable. And here is a great word that we could use in our community, right? Israel, yes, it has its challenges, security challenges, political challenges. It's all there. But we can also speak about Israel in terms of fun. When we get to Israel to go and visit the Culinary Institute, to have a real taste of Israel, because the pathway to be able to build bridges of understanding goes through those shared human experiences that come together in food and music and elsewhere. And that is very exciting to have. And also, the second element that's no less important is its universal aspect, right? When I'm talking about music connecting people, that lesson translates to wherever I am. And this is an element that empowers our listeners to make a positive difference in their own lives. And I think this is something that resonates with so many people. So I always tell people who get to travel to Israel, they could take one of the great trips with JNF. They could take to Israel on their own. What they have to prepare is to be ready to come back with a few extra pounds. And you should get ready for it, but you will enjoy every pound of it, because in Israel, there is such a big focus on quality eating, right? Fruits, vegetables, we consume it more than anyone else on earth. And there is a good reason why we do it. And I hope everybody who visits Israel gets to understand that reason firsthand.
And it is said that there are more vegans per capita in Israel than in any other country, right? And I have to...
But being vegan is no compromise. It's actually an upgrade.
It is. And I have to tell you about the food because as soon as you post something, I'm not a big poster when it comes to food on social media because I sort of roll my eyes when other people do that, full disclosure. However, the last time I was in Israel was in February 2019 for JNF. We did a whole bunch of interviews there, had an amazing time. And the first thing that I did when I got to Tel Aviv was I went to the Sabich place at Frischman and Dizengoff. Everybody knows that place. And I happened to post it because I thought, okay, I'm here in Israel. That's what you're supposed to do. I cannot tell you, my Facebook page lit up like a Christmas tree, as they say, because everybody knows that place, loves that place. And there's just something about food that just indeed is the great connector.
Well, what a great conversation starter. I mean, I always
Yeah.
recommend for, groups that support Israel on campus and want to build bridges of understanding. I always tell them, create a conversation with other people that emanates not just from what you care about and are interested in, but what they might enjoy as well, and use that as a first element.
I'm so glad you brought that up, what you speak to folks on campus about, because it's exactly where I wanted to go with you right now, Shahar, because I do understand that you spoke with both Caravan for Democracy and faculty fellowship participants in Israel. What were those conversations like? What did you tell them about Israel? And really, what was their reaction?
Well, first of all, wow. I have to tell you, that was the first time I got to, spend time with these professors and students on the Caravan for Democracy trips, and it was an incredible experience.
And before we proceed, why don't you just give a little bit of an explanation about what those programs are in case folks don't know about them?
So you have student leaders, non-Jews, who come from all across the U.S. for the first time to be acquainted with the state of Israel, and similar with professors who come from all over the U.S., people who had no prior interaction directly with Israel, just what we see in the mainstream media and beyond, and they get to experience Israel firsthand and create collaboration with colleagues in Israel to be able to find ways to work together beyond the trip. And it all started, Stephen, with this Zoom session that I got to do with the students. And Zoom sessions are tricky. We all know how tricky they are. And you have to speak to these, I think there were about 90 students on the call, and all you see in front of you is these small squares. And you keep on asking yourself, like, if an alien watched me with all of my body gestures and movements, like, they would think I'm crazy. But you sit in front of the camera and you just want them to feel you the way they might when they interact personally with you. And I think to myself, how can I bring Israel to life for them on the screen as we're on those squares? And, we take the personal path and we share Israel's story through who we are. And I think that's a great message across the board. Tell them about you, and through that you can tell a greater story. Wherever you come from, whatever you say, whatever you love, that will reek with authenticity and passion. Because that's who we are. And I'll never forget, in the middle of the conversation, one of the students kind of like raises a hand and said, I love what this guy's saying. Can he come with us to Israel? And I laughed it off and we had a great conversation. And lo and behold, a few weeks later, I'm in Israel with those students. And it's the first time they're in Israel. And of course, they were exhausted, like every proper trip would, because there is so much to see and so little time. But what amazed me was how they were able to take that hammer and break the wall, shatter it to smithereens, those walls that are artificially built between us through images portrayed by, media outlets, through social media lies, when the mere base of our humanity, shared humanity, does not resonate through those mediums. And then for the first time, they come to Israel and they interact with real people, and they get to see who Israelis are, what kind of Israelis are there, what we care about, what kind of experiences they've had. And I got to speak to them at the end of their trip, literally the day that they were taking off. And it was amazing to spend time with them, just to hear about their experiences, but also to share with them and tell them, here, you've listened to what you were told before. Now you went through these experiences. And so many of them, Stephen, that blew my mind. I rarely, if I have ever seen anything like it. So many of them shared their own personal accounts of their trip to Israel on their social media accounts, on their local college campus papers. Wow. Just wow. for them to say how inspired they were by the spirit of collaboration, by identifying opportunities to make a difference, by how versatile and exciting Israel was with all of its challenges. And I have to tell you, there was a fascinating element when one of the students, I could see when I gave that summary, there was a barrier there. And she was very, very, very focused on the politics. And she came up to me and she said, everybody came up, let's take pictures, let's connect, let's work together, which I loved, by the way. There is no better endorsement you can get, especially from those students, than having those interactions. Can I catch you on Instagram? Mm-hmm. But then you have this student who comes up and says, can I have a word with you? I said, absolutely, let's talk. So for half an hour, we speak about Israeli politics, Israeli-Palestinian issues, Gaza, the West Bank, the Oslo Accords. And she was able to really bring it up in such an informative way. And at some point she said, the situation in Gaza is terrible. I explained the Israeli position of, that we also view it as terrible and we wish for Gaza to move on and build itself rather than focus on wars with Israel. And then at some point, this student who came from a critical point of Israel tells me, so why don't you just take Gaza back? Just take Gaza back and save all of these people. And then she kind of caught her head and said, I can't believe I just said that. So once people reach that level of, we don't have a solution, just understand the problem that we're faced with so that we can move forward together. Don't come from a point of view where everything is black and white and oversimplified, but really take a deep look at where we are. That would make such a big difference across the board. So for me, that was really one of the best experiences, including, by the way, with the professor, similar interaction. The key was you come clean-handed. You have no, propagandic baggage. You just speak to people like people. You have a living room conversation that comes from within, that is real and authentic. And people, Stephen, respond to that. And that's a great message also for everybody who listens to us and enjoys celebrating Israel at 75, to understand that element. Be who you are. And with that authenticity is the pathway for success in human interaction, even when there are political differences. I may disagree politically with many people, but they will still see me as human, which I think is what's lacking in the general discourse.
So Israel is 75. What about the next 75 years, Shahar? What do you see?
Wow. First of all, I can tell you that for as long as we can be part of that future, I think it'll be incredible to see where Israel is headed. Israel is still shaping itself in so many ways, both internally and socially. Think about people who still come, but came from different places, who now become, this one nation. Think about the exponential growth that Israel has experienced, that innovative social drive that exists within Israelis. Where is that going to take us? Just a few weeks ago, it was announced that a new venture capital fund is investing, get this, $125 million in Israeli startups in the field of space ventures. So the new frontier that's going to be reached by humanity. So much of it is happening in Israel. So to be able to be part of this global adventure that Israel is, because Israel is really a global adventure. Things come out of Israel that affect everybody's lives. Whatever is beating inside of you, whatever electronics you're using, when you think about methodologies for emergency assistance across the world, there are so many realms that interact with Israel and Israelis. And I am very optimistic, looking at what the Abraham Accords was able to achieve in times of, great doubts when nothing is going to happen in the Middle East. And yet we see that Palestinians did not hold the key for political stagnation, that yes, we have to cope with what's happening with the Palestinians, but we can still move forward with other countries as well and build bridges of understanding. For me to think that there was a Holocaust commemoration ceremony in the Emirates, to talk about Holocaust education, to bring Emiratis and Israelis back and forth who study in different universities and academic institutions, to see so many Israelis taking their must trip to Dubai and elsewhere. I love this. And I am so excited about where Israel is going. I think it's a great human adventure on so many. You don't have to be a Jew. You don't have to be an Israeli. to love what's happening in Israel.
Yeah, because when you think about other nations around that time that gained their independence and that were formed, and one asks oneself, where are they now? I mean, I used to live in Singapore for a long time. So that was established in 1965. So
Right.
Singapore from 65 to now has really come a long way. I mean, that's just an amazing success story. Or you look at South Korea, for example, another great success story. But you look at some of these other countries that have tremendous amount of natural resources, that have populations exponentially larger than Israel. And you wonder really, they're great countries. I've loved visiting many of them. And,
Right.
they're fascinating with very, very long traditions and very rich cultures. Yet the impact that they have made on the world scene versus what Israel has made on the world scene, vastly different.
Vastly different. I think that Israel is a unique creation on
Mm.
so many levels, both from the Jewish perspective of, think about Jewish history, right? Like I'm looking at the painting behind me and I think about the fall of the Second Temple and that moment when the Jewish people was dispersed all over the world. And that is the light that guides me to never go back to that situation again, to always focus on our ability to unite in spite of our differences and create progress that belongs not just to us, but to the world. And being part of such a positive endeavor, I always say, supporting Israel and loving this trajectory of history is all part of me being a good person. I just want to do good upon my surroundings. I want to be a positive member, like I said, in the family of nations. I'll give you another example. I met friends who work now with Philos, a Christian organization that focuses on fighting anti-Semitism and supporting Jewish communities in Israel. And I had a conversation with its founder, someone by the name of Luke Moon. And Luke told me, I literally bumped into it. I was working in different places around the world trying to work on development projects. Somebody bumped into me, invited me to an anti-Israel conference in Bethlehem called Christ at the Checkpoint. And when I arrived there, I had no idea about what's happening. And I started talking to the people. And I remember asking them, what's your end game? Where do you want to go with this? Said, we want to achieve peace. So Luke asked, okay, and what does that mean? Living side by side with Israel as a Jewish state? He said, no, we just want peace. And Luke insisted and said, but what does that mean? We don't need another Miss Beauty pageant quote. We just want to understand. And then he decided to dive deeper into the matter and he got to understand things. And to me, it meant so much because it said that somebody good-natured who wants to do good in the world looked into our situation and chose us. That's a beautiful statement, because if you care about what's right and what's just, and you want to do good by people, by communities, by nations, join us. Be part of this endeavor. Enjoy Israel at 75 and beyond, and be part of the light that can banish the darkness around the world. God knows we need it.
Amen to that, brother. Well, listen, as we wind down our conversation, Shahar,
No, already, Stephen? So
listen,
short?
how many hours do you have? I told you at the beginning, this is the second time you're on the show. We're definitely going to have you back. So hold some of your enthusiasm and your gems of wisdom for our future conversations. But as we do indeed wind down this conversation with you, as you know, Jewish National Fund USA has launched a whole campaign called Conversations on Zionism,
Right.
reclaiming the narrative. And I know you are very much a part of that. So I don't have to tell you what it's all about for our dear listeners that might not be familiar with that program, though it's really meant to reclaim the narrative, to show the beauty and the inclusivity of what Zionism is all about. And we encourage everybody in earshot to go to youtube.com/Zionism Studios to hear those truly, truly insightful and very informative conversations. I've learned a ton from them. And so with that in mind, indeed, as we wind down this conversation with you, what does Zionism mean to you, and what are you most proud of when it comes to being a Zionist, Shahar?
I mentioned the expression that resonates for me is Israel, the heart of a nation. That is what Zionism is to me. It's the heart of the world. It's the ability to care and do good upon others, bli cheshbon, as we say in Hebrew, without shopkeeping, without account, just do good for the sake of good. And we're able, and so many people, I think, and that's Israel's secret sauce, so many people are able to do well while they're doing good. And I think that this is really the key to Israel's success and the key to my Zionist activity. And what I love the most about JNF's flagship project about reclaiming Zionism is, for too long have we allowed our enemies to define who we are, and it's time we claim that word back. We will define who we are. And if you want to understand Zionism, go and visit the Culinary Institute. Join a Caravan for Democracy trip and explore Israel. Plant more trees, as Israel again has more trees as every year goes by, the only country on earth. That is Zionism to me, being a productive force in this world of ours, which is also an essence of Judaism. So Zionism is ours and ours forever and ours to define. So I call upon everyone to listen to IsraelCast and follow the path of Zionism, to be inspired, to be educated, and to be empowered in moving forward.
And on that positive note, as Israel marks its 75th birthday, we want to thank you so much for joining us here on this very special episode of IsraelCast, Shahar.
Thank you, and l'chaim, Stephen, to many more to come.
Amen. And we'll see you again soon. And indeed, we'll have info about Shahar on the show notes page of our website, jnf.org/IsraelCast. And of course, before we move on with a little housekeeping, just want to remind you once again what we were just talking about, that Jewish National Fund believes the time has come for us to reclaim the narrative, take ownership of the word Zionism, and show the world how beautiful, inclusive, and inspirational it really is, as you heard from Shahar. So do join Jewish National Fund USA's Conversations on Zionism, Reclaiming the Narrative. Go to youtube.com/Zionism Studios to learn more and to hear these just really extraordinary and insightful conversations. Now, for the housekeeping, we do release new episodes of IsraelCast every other Wednesday. And just so you never miss an episode, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. It's so easy. Just search for IsraelCast. And don't forget to rate and review us, because that really helps us with our rankings, which in turn make it easier for more people around the world to find us and to hear from extraordinary people just like Shahar. Or you can always enjoy the show by visiting us at our website. Once again, it's jnf.org/IsraelCast. And indeed, it takes a whole moshav to put IsraelCast together. For that, we thank Vivian Grossman, Dara Shapiro, JD Krebs, and Ellie Cadron. Thanks to all of them. Our editors are Jay Rothman and James Casada from Miratone Studios right here in the very heart of New York City. And the music that you hear at the top and tail of the program is titled My Eden. It's by the very talented Rafi Malkiel from his album Water on the Tzaddik label. IsraelCast is powered by Jewish National Fund USA, as we've said, your voice in Israel. For more information about JNF USA, do visit jnf.org. And if you'd like to write to us with story ideas or just to say hello, I know what I'd love to hear from you. So do email us at israelcast@jnf.org. Meantime, I'm Stephen Shalowitz, thanking you for tuning in, wishing Israel a very happy 75th birthday, and looking forward to having you join us on future episodes of IsraelCast.